Welcome back to the Your Houston podcast. This is our first episode of 2021, and we're happy to be back after a brief winter break. And for everyone out in Iowa, don't worry. Nick is just a little under the weather today, but he will be back in action next week. Today, we're excited to talk to former Harris County Clerk Chris Hollins, who oversaw a historic election here in Harris County in 2020. For those who aren't familiar with Chris, he grew up here in the Houston area, went off to Morehouse College, and then did a joint degree program with Yale Law School and Harvard Business School. Spent some time at McKinsey & Company, and then went to the Obama administration for the first year at the Office of Personnel Management. So we are very thrilled to have him and hear all about his time serving as the Harris County Clerk in 2020. Here we go. So today we're very excited to be speaking with Chris Hollins, former Harris County Clerk, who oversaw a historic 2020 election, and we're excited to be speaking with him about that experience. But before we get to that, we're going to do our Liftoff lightning round.
I feel the liftoff. The clock has started. Roger.
Chris, you get to go to one restaurant tonight for dinner on us. Where are you going and what are you ordering?
Oh, man. If you put me on the spot, I'm just going to say Papacitos, and I'm going to order some fajitas. If you give me some more time, I'm sure I could come up with maybe a more trendy spot. But I grew up on Papacitos. That was always my favorite place.
That's a solid choice. You can't go wrong, especially with the fajitas there. What's your favorite small town in Texas?
Growing up, we used to go to a town called Weimar, Texas. It's about halfway to San Antonio. And we particularly go there on like July 4th and New Year's and do fireworks. But then there's also, hunting. And then just as a kid, just like random exploring out in the woods. So I have a lot of fun memories in Weimar.
And I imagine a lot of folks haven't heard about Weimar. So this could help put them on the map there.
They also have a great sausage. The butcher there, incredible.
What's the last book that you read?
So I'm in the middle of a book about Jim Baker right now, who was sort of, a Republican kind of puppet master of our government for decades. Before that, the last book that I read was by a Palestinian doctor. I think it's called I Shall Not Hate. But it just details his personal experiences, in the Israeli, Palestinian, situation there. Really, really powerful book.
If you could have drinks with anybody, past or present, who would it be?
I would love to sit down with maybe Harry Belafonte and, hear some of the stories about, the civil rights era, but also, his entertainment work. I think he's lived a really interesting life, and I could both be, again, entertained, but also learn a lot about history.
Right. No, that'd be a fantastic choice. If you could go anywhere, we had a private jet ready to take you and your family anywhere right now, where would you go?
I think probably just someplace in the Caribbean to a beach. I mean, we haven't gotten to travel so much lately, as I'm sure that's a shared experience. But especially now that it's cold as we're recording, being able to have some sunshine, a beach, maybe a nice drink in my hand would be pretty incredible. And I choose the Caribbean in particular because I assumed in your question that I would actually have to sit on the flight there. So I'd want to get there pretty quick.
There you go. Yeah, you would. And I think a lot of us would choose a nice, relaxing beach pretty close by. That's not Galveston. Shipley's or
Galveston's underrated, man.
it is. I have to say, I've been spending a lot of time there lately, and it is underrated. Shipley's or Voodoo Donut?
Shipley's.
Of course, Shipley's. Yep. And then last one, who's your favorite athlete?
LeBron James for sure. Right now, we graduated high school the same year, and so I was always just kind of following him and sort of like living through him. But seeing the level of greatness that he's been able to attain while also being active and vocal, in the political sphere, around civil rights and around really important issues in the community. I've been really impressed by him and look up to him.
It's definitely inspiring what he's doing and the way he's giving back and investing in communities. I think he's a great pick. So moving on, let's talk about the 2020 election and let's talk about you and your role as county clerk. First, what made you step up to offer yourself to serve and to take on such a responsibility?
It was, honestly speaking, where we were at the time was it was the middle of May. We had an election coming up, and I'm not speaking about November. I'm speaking about the primary runoff that was only about a month out from starting. And I had been a supporter of my predecessors, Diane Troutman, specifically because I knew how important the role of county clerk was in administering elections. One of the things that she had already done was to move us to the concept of voting centers, which meant that on election day, you could vote at any center in the county versus just your precinct, which is just it was bizarre that we didn't have that before. But again, you change leadership, particularly in this case, changing parties, and you get leadership that's going to be more geared towards wanting people to vote and to vote easily and to have access. And so she had made that change, but there was still so much more that could be done. And oh, by the way, we were headed into our first election during a time of COVID-19. And in the office, while I remain a big fan of Diane's, had been challenged. There had been like long lines in the March election that had made national news. In the mayoral election before that, there had been some issues around slow reporting times. And so it was clear that there was some operational improvement that could potentially be made. And I just thought that, like, with my understanding of the importance of the office, with my understanding of operations, not particularly elections operations, but just knowing how to run a large organization and equip the folks in that organization to achieve its mission. I thought that I could bring that skill set to this thing that I cared about so much, and be able to change the way that elections were done in Harris County. And so it helped that nobody else wanted to do it. And I think that made me more of a prime candidate. But I stepped up because it mattered so much, and I thought that I could do a pretty good job.
Well, we've seen a number of individuals now take on leadership roles at the county that are younger and part of the millennial generation, the county judge, the treasurer, now the city attorney or the county attorney, yourself when you were in that role. So what do you say to other people out there that have that same passion and drive to make a difference, but maybe they haven't followed or don't have the establishment view of experience coming from numbers of years of elected experience or working for elected officials who want to take that leap?
Yeah. One, age, is not a thing that that matters in my mind. Um, when Lena ran, she was laughed off by many, and she has just been phenomenal ever since she set foot in the county judge's office. And she's brought a vision. She has brought a level of thought and strategy that we hadn't seen in county government here in Harris County before. I thought I brought a new lens to the county clerk's office, and I know for sure that Christian Menifee is going to blow us away over the next 4 years as he serves as county attorney, and he's going to bring justice to Harris County in a new way. But what I'll also say is that while age is not important, I think experience truly is important. I think that all of the passion I have for democratic ideals like voting would not have mattered so much if I didn't bring along the skills that I developed through a career as a management consultant and as an attorney. Same thing with Christian. Spent many years practicing big law and learning the ins and outs and sharpening his mind and his set of skills to be able to do the work that's now in front of him. And so we can't just ignore the need for experience, but that doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, I was in this office or I worked for this Politico or what have you. Ultimately, what's going to move the needle when it comes to administration is, frankly, a set of skills that I don't see government doing too well. And so private sector experience, I think, can lend itself to being effective in these types of offices. But also you need to know how to do things and sort of, have a healthy level of respect for how government operates, because we've also seen folks who come in from the private sector with no government experience and do a terrible job because they don't know how to make the wheels of government work.
Yep, it's definitely a balance, and I think we're seeing at the county what positive changes can be brought in with that fresh perspective, that drive, and that ambition. So when we talk about, you mentioned earlier running an election during a pandemic. You are appointed interim county clerk. There's a runoff election, and right after that, you're gearing up for the presidential election. When you talk about 2.5 million registered voters, 11,000 poll workers, trying to keep the voters and the staff safe, to me, that sounds like such a monumental challenge. What were some of the things that you immediately did that worked to address that, and how would you rate the success of that effort at the end of the day?
First thing, going into July was we need to have PPE, period. On my first day in office, we did not have any, and that needed to be figured out quite quickly. And while today, if we said, oh, we need 1 million masks tomorrow, we could figure that out because now making masks is like a business, right? But just at that time, just a few months ago, being able to procure large amounts of hand sanitizer and masks and other items was extremely difficult because everybody across the country, across the world, was trying to get their hands on them, and there wasn't the same supply to meet that demand. And so that needed to be figured out really, really quickly. And there was, a bit of a scramble to get that done. And luckily we could use the county judge's emergency powers to help us along in that process. But beyond PPE, you need to have, practices and protocols in place. Your operations had to lead to safe outcomes. And to do that, we just tried to learn from others who had already done it. One of the first efforts that I made was to reach out to elections administrators across the country who had already administered elections during the time of COVID-19. And, just going back and reminding you, we had our primary on March 3rd, and then everything shut down. I want to say on like the 6th or the 7th. It was just like right after that. And had our election been a few days later, who knows, what would have happened.
Right.
But so, we reached out to, Miami-Dade County. We reached out to Maricopa County, which got really famous in November. We reached out to numerous jurisdictions in Wisconsin to just ask them, what happened when you held your election? And, tell us what went well, tell us what you would have us do if you kind of would do it again, but also tell us what didn't go well, so we can try to avoid some of those pitfalls. And so many of our safety precautions came from those conversations, as well as conversations with folks in the private sector. I've been meaning to write a tweet about this for a while and never have, but the amount of hand sanitizer that we procured for the July election, it came from a conversation between myself and an assistant manager at the HEB over on McGregor.
Wow.
Because we literally asked them, like, please, tell me how many, customers you have that come in on a daily basis. Okay, how much hand sanitizer are you going through? How often do you think people, when they walk by that thing, actually use it? And I'm literally just like taking notes and like doing math to say, all right, this is how much HEB is using, and we want to use conservative estimates. So we want to have probably 25% more than that. This is how many voters we expect to show up in July. This is how many voting centers we're going to have. And like using that mathematically to come up with, okay, we need this many gallons of hand sanitizer. Those are the types of like decisions that we had to make, which again, as liberal, as conservative as I could be as a person, that has zero to do with like how much hand sanitizer we need to keep these people safe.
Right.
And just even having like the insight to think about it that way is not particularly common in government or amongst like elected officials. And so I'm glad that we had that kind of vision on our team and the level of sort of expertise from a number of different parts of the private and public sector to help us do that thinking and make those decisions.
I'll say I did serve as a poll worker on election day at Silky's polling station, a mutual friend of ours. And it was impressive, the amount of precautions and the level of seriousness everything was taken with. And we had 2 masks on the whole day, and now you're hearing that double masking is highly effective at preventing COVID-19 from spreading, and it's something you're seeing a lot more of. Well, that was being done here back in November, and the plexiglass, the sanitizer. I think everyone that I worked with felt safe being a poll worker, and the voters that came through felt safe voting.
Yeah, no, and that's what they expressed to us as well. And that's where drive-through voting, came from. Just trying to think through, how do we make this safer and more convenient? And then, of course, this became controversial across the country as well. But that's where the push for voting by mail came from, and that started even before before I became the county clerk. Our commissioner's court had the insight to say, look, we have this pandemic. We want as many of our seniors and folks with disabilities to be able to vote from the comfort and safety of their home as possible. So how do we maximize that? And so, part of our effort to keep people safe was to allow as many people as were eligible and who were interested to be able to vote from home.
You mentioned drive-through voting, and this is something that became controversial. The Attorney General sued to get those votes tossed out, and sued on the effort to mail every voter a vote by mail application. You received a lot of pushback from the state. is this our new normal in elections, where the state and the county are butting heads throughout the process, and we're just going to have to fight back every time?
I mean, I think it goes beyond just elections, but it will certainly rear its head again in elections. Right now, you know, Republican, I won't even say leaders, Republican officials at the state level are using the gears and levels of power that they have to do whatever they can to challenge progressive ideas, ideals, and leaders across this state. And so, you know, Judge Hidalgo is going to continue to be a target for Greg Abbott and for Ken Paxton for the foreseeable future. And, while, Isabel Longoria, our new elections administrator, is in a purely nonpartisan role. And frankly, I thought that, my administration executed our roles in a nonpartisan manner as well. Those attacks are going to come. And the reason that they're going to come is because when Ken Paxton is trying to throw out thousands and thousands of Harris County votes, even though he knows that many of those votes are Republicans, he doesn't care because, democracy doesn't matter to him. Power matters to him. So as long as when he throws out those Republican votes, he's able to throw out more Democratic votes in the process, that's a win for him. And folks like Greg Abbott are going to back him up on that. Our Secretary of State just totally refused to do her job as the chief elections officer of the state of Texas during 2020. Greg Abbott in no way held her accountable, and all that's intentional. Whether because Greg Abbott truly believes some of these things that he allows to happen under his watch, or he gets enough pressure from the right to to forsake his ideals. And one of the ways you saw that was when he decided to shut down the drop-off locations that we had set up for mail ballots. So he said, okay, you don't want this stuff to go through the mail. We're going to set it up, allow people to drop them off. Oh, no, now it's too easy to drop them off. Shut it down, right? And he literally reversed his own proclamation in order to do so because Alan West and some other folks told him to.
So folks who are listening, if they're angry, if they're frustrated, and they want to get involved, we as an organization, we're a nonprofit. We like to channel energy to activism at the local level. What can people do? How can they get involved in voting rights advocacy or voter protection efforts if this is something that they feel passionate about?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think that the number one thing you can do right now to have impact is register folks to vote who are not currently registered. As you get toward election day of say 2022, but even, we have some May 21 elections coming up in and around Harris County. Of course, I'd say get those folks to vote, but you have to have sort of your entrance ticket to be able to cast a ballot to begin with, and that's voter registration. And there are still millions of Texans who are eligible voters who are not registered, and so figuring out a way to get involved in that effort is important. The first thing you need to do is become a volunteer deputy voter registrar. Here in Harris County, you would go to the election administrator's website and figure out when the next training is and so forth to become a BDVR. But then from there, get involved with, a nonprofit organization who's focused on this, or a political party for that matter. I know you all are a nonprofit, and I'm trying not to push one political party over the other. But if you reach out to either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party of Harris County, either one of them, I'm sure would be able to put you to work registering voters if that was your passion.
And we'll put up links to the administrator's website with the VDVR info, so that if anyone's interested, they can access that right there. It's clear that there's still some mistrust in the electoral process. We're seeing that play out nationally. From your experience, is there anything that the county clerk can do to make folks more confident in our local elections if they have any doubts at all about the integrity?
Yeah, I mean, well, we tried to be as radically transparent as possible. One thing that we started doing in, I want to say this, my second week in office, was, if you were a voting rights organization or a political party, you could join us on a weekly call that was set up just for you to come and figure out what was going on and be with us every step of the way. And for those who wanted to get even more involved, we had our 24, safe initiatives to make our elections more safe, more secure, more accessible, and so forth. And you could join those teams and actually do some of that work with us and see what we were doing. And you'd have the confidence because you were part of the team that did it yourself. And that was, again, to me, an unprecedented level of access that folks in our community had to their government, to see this sausage being made. But sausage being made is not even a good example because what we were doing was so straightforward in nature. Like, there's not much to it. We make sure that the machines are set up properly. They go through a ton of testing that's done by a bipartisan coalition that is promoted by the parties. They sign off on it. Then you allow people to vote. Those voting machines are not connected to the internet. They can't be hacked. You have to sign in and bring your photo ID in order to check in. Have a special code that gives you access to the machine, and then cast your ballot. And then for those who vote through the mail system, we're checking your signature twice. Again, a bipartisan group of folks who are doing that. They're calling you and reaching out to you directly if there's any issue with your ballot or any reason to believe, that your intentions on that ballot, may not be followed, and clearing that up before that vote gets counted. And so, this was shown, even, folks from, the Donald Trump Department of Justice said, like, this is the most secure election we've ever had in the history of this country. And any belief otherwise is just straight up false. And based on lies that are intentionally being spread to feed off of the cynicism and ultimately, break down trust in democracy. I mean, this is a very intentional effort, and it's extremely disappointing. I'm glad that this country survived, January 6th and that entire process, and that we have leadership now in place that believes in democracy. But we certainly have a long way to go to strengthen our institutions.
So I didn't realize that y'all invited groups and political parties to be that involved in the process. Did a lot of organizations take you up on that and join the efforts?
Yeah, ultimately there were 40 plus that were involved. And this was local organizations as well as national voting rights organizations. And these were groups, like the Urban League that represented diverse communities, groups like Tent, who represented the, LGBTQ plus community, and so many others that just want to see good government and see democracy function the way that it should in a country like America that claims to hold these ideals. And so, there was a lot of involvement from folks, and we learned a lot along the way, and we're able to improve again our processes, our policies, our trainings, based on feedback that was provided to us by members of the community.
We promote increased transparency in local government, and we have some positions out on that. And so to hear that is very encouraging because, I mean, I think you can do that across a number of departments and processes that are going on at the local level. And again, get more engagement, improve them, make them more efficient. There's just a ton of benefit to that. And also, you clear up a lot of misconceptions or rumors that can be put out there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as someone who's been involved in politics for a while, and I know you've seen this, there are always going to be detractors. And part of our efforts to involve as many people as possible, in addition to getting the best ideas and coming up with solutions to potentially problems that we didn't even see, but it was also, frankly, to silence the detractors, because no one could go out and say, why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? It's like, no, you were at the meeting when we decided it. You know exactly why. You know which options we weighed, and you know why we went down the path that we did. And of course, people can say whatever they're going to say regardless, but we knew 100% that we were being upfront, that we were considering, folks' positions on, these various steps that we were taking, and that we chose the best option that made sense for the people of Harris County. And so we're very proud of our efforts and stand by them.
Okay, so one final question before we move on to our Houston, we have a problem. What surprised you the most about your time as county clerk?
Perhaps I was naive in going in, but my thought going in was that this job was going to be relatively boring. Again, when I was talking about why I was interested in the job, I thought I'd come in and, do some math and say, all right, let's put the machine there instead of there. And that's going to help us with better traffic flow and people be able to vote 10% faster, and that would be it. Right. And, people would have this good experience, probably wouldn't even realize how good the experience was, but their votes would get casted and then my job would be done. The level of opposition that we faced so publicly, and the folks and again, elected officials and whomever who were willing to so publicly be on the side of voting suppression, it surprised me, and perhaps it shouldn't have, but I did not see that coming, and then I ultimately didn't expect what we were doing to be so high profile. I thought that I'd be begging the Chronicle to cover how cool this drive-through voting concept was, or, begging Channel 2 and 13 and 11 to talk about extended hours when we did 24-hour voting. It turned out that they did that much and more, and that, the city was sort of abuzz in some of these issues, and I was not anticipating that. I mean, one of the I remember so many of my conversations with voters, but one that stuck out with me down the stretch was talking to a uniformed police officer who was wearing like the Blue Lives Matter logo face mask, who I am nearly certain, but you can't make assumptions, but I'm nearly certain that he did not vote the way that I voted. But having a conversation with him about how he and his wife voted drive-through, and how it was such just a smooth experience, and he hopes that is here to stay in Harris County. That I remember that, and that was a very heartening conversation because, again, things that make voting easier are not for Democrats, right? They're for all of the voters, and I think we saw that. I mean, we don't know how person one versus person two voted, but I can tell you that tens of thousands of Republicans and tens of thousands of Democrats and tens of thousands of everybody in between voted using these drive-throughs, and thousands of folks voted during our extended hours, which many of them would not have had the opportunity to participate in our democracy, had those hours not been there for them to vote at a time that was convenient for them and their families. And so, I know that Isabel Longoria, who was a senior member of my staff and who is now our elections administrator, is going to continue and even expand upon many of those those features and services that we offered. And so I'm really proud of her and excited to see what she's going to do.
Isabel is someone we're actually excited to have a conversation with on the podcast. I just heard about the new voting machines that the county allocated money for that have a paper backup. And that's something that we haven't had here before. And also just to learn more about what an election administrator does. This is a brand new office. It takes things from the county clerk, takes components from the tax assessor collector. And so just to provide that information, we look forward to speaking with her about that. So before we wrap up, we're going to ask you a question, and it's a hypothetical, but we just love to hear how folks would approach it and would answer it.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem.
And this one might not be so much of a problem as an opportunity, but congratulations, you now own the Houston Rockets. What are you going to do to build a championship team?
Yeah, I'm a huge Houston Rockets fan, and certainly was disappointed with how this season started off, and disappointed in James Harden, in particular. I know that he wanted to move on to what he thought to be greener pastures, but I thought the way that he handled it was, not exceptionally professional. But now we have a team of folks who want to be here, still need to, gel and kind of figure out their system. But I like to see what we have. And so, I think that there's, we have a leader in John Wall. We have some really strong players in Depot and Cousins. And then Christian Wood is a phenomenal young player. I'd like to see, one more sort of young player, one guy who's maybe 3 or 4 years into the league, who could join the gang. And, I don't think we'll be competing for a championship this year, but in, a couple of times, perhaps as that Lakers dynasty is fading out, that we could be rising into that conversation. Like I said, I think we have a real strong core. I'm excited about what Coach Silas is bringing to the team. But like I said, I think one more, young guy to round out the squad would be, would be pushing us towards where we need to be.
So you're not going to go after LeBron?
I think that's a lost cause. I think he's probably he's going to be with the Lakers until his son gets drafted by somebody, and then he's going to go play one more year there, maybe 2, and then that'll be it. So I think the best way to get LeBron is to draft Bronny.
There you go.
In a couple of years' time.
All right. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us. We enjoyed the conversation and the insight into your time as county clerk and the 2020 election. We'll have you back on after the next adventure you have.
Sounds good. I appreciate you having me. It's been a blast.
Thanks for checking out our podcast today. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Chris Hollins. We have every episode available on our website at yourhue.com. That's YOURHOU.com. Also, be sure to like our Facebook page at Your Houston to get updates on information we post of things happening around the area. We're also on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and you can find us on LinkedIn too. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.